So here's the deal. On one of the videos I put up last week, somebody asked if I could do a sub-role division, or a divide the champions into sub-roles. So you have the tanks, you have the supports, you have the damage, you have the flank, and all of this, all of these can be split up into, for instance, for the tanks, you have offensive tanks, you have defensive tanks, you have more flank-oriented tanks. So that's kind of what this is going to be. It's going to be dividing up the champions so that they fit more appropriate roles than what it says in game. So this screen you're seeing now is literally just the definition of each role in the game now. Like in the game, if you go into game, this is what role each champion will be under. But as I'm sure you guys know, it's not really accurate. Obviously, a character like Pip is not really a support. He's more of a mix between support, damage, and flank. Grok right now isn't really a support. He's just a straight up damage dealer, potentially a flanker. So that's what this is going to be. It's going to be a division of the champions into their sub roles. So I'm going to start with the tanks. Obviously the tanks, you have Barrack, Fernando, Makoa, Ruckus, Torvald, and Inara. So all of these, they are tanks. I would say they all are tanks. It's not like in the support role where, for instance, Pip and Grok aren't really supports. I would say all of these are tanks. I think that's a good definition. They are tanks. But they can all serve different roles. They can all be split up into more subcategories, basically. So if we look here, so this is kind of like this is the main split. First of all, so you have the 6 tanks, and this is their main split. You have 2 defensive tanks, which are Barrack and Ruckus. Generally speaking, they'll be more point-oriented. They have less mobility. Obviously, Ruckus has very little mobility besides using his F, and Barrack has very low mobility in that he has to stay around his turrets, and he has to stay put for his turrets and for his barricade, and he has to use those. He can. Just like Ruckus, they both can go aggressive. They can push up if they want to. They can get high ground. Ruckus obviously has his legendary card option to do that. But generally speaking, you're going to see them around the point or around a chokehold, somewhere where they can hold a defensive area. And then you have the aggressive tanks. That's Fernando and Makoa. Both of them have, just like Barrack and Ruckus, they have the ability to stand on point. They have the ability to buy time. They have the ability to hold chokeholds very well. They both have shields, they both have a lot of HP, and they both have decent damage. So they can do that, but generally speaking, you're going to see them more on the aggressive side. You're going to see Fernando pushing into the backline. You're going to see Makoa looking either around the point or in the enemy backline looking for a hook on a carry. Very rarely are you going to see the Makoa consistently hooking tanks. He's going to be trying to get around the tanks so that he can hook a carry or the healer. Just someone that you can kill quickly and use your burst damage. And then you have the supportive tanks, which are Inara and Torvald. Obviously, Inara is kind of shit right now, so it's mostly about Torvald. But Inara is also a supportive champion, and that is that they can be on point. They can't really be aggressive. Like they can't be defensive because they can't just stand on point forever and ever and ever. They don't have the kits to do that properly, whereas Barrack and Ruckus do. But they also don't have the kit to really be aggressive. What instead they have is they have utility. They have Inara obviously can put her wall, she can cripple, she can slow, she has all these things that she can provide as assistance for her team. Like she is basically a support that is very tanky. And same thing with Torvald. He's a support that is very tanky. That you can run them however you want. You can put them in the backline and just pocket somebody and keep them alive, or you can run them a bit more aggressively where you're sort of in the backline, but usually you're just kind of like in the tank's face and just kind of harassing them consistently, which is something more like a Fernando might do, but they don't really have the chase potential of a Fernando. So these are like the main sub roles. The tanks are pretty easy. They're pretty clear cut. There's no it doesn't mix up too much. It's just clear cut. You have 2 defensive, 2 aggressive, and 2 supportive. All of them can fill each other's roles, but those are the roles they fill the best, basically. Then you have your supports. Your supports, so I'm putting Torvald and Inara up here because, again, we mentioned they're supportive. They fill support qualities. But you have your 5 main supports: Ying, Snake, Grok, Grover, and Pip. This is in-game definition. We know that like Pip and Grok, for instance, aren't really supports. So you have, first of all, you have your healers. There's 2 healers in the game. There's a lot of characters with heals, both self heals and team heals, but there's really just 2 healers in the game, and that's Snake and Ying. Snake and Ying both, they can pocket heal. Their whole kit is designed to heal people, basically. And then you have your secondary healers. Pip and Grover are both secondary healers. You rarely will pick them as an individual healer. You can if you really want to, but both of them are meant as a do damage or fulfill a utility role and then heal as a secondary objective. So like if I'm playing Pip in a competitive match, my goal is to do a lot of damage, get my chicken, slow everybody, and then if I have the chance, I will heal other people. Especially with a build like Gift Giver. And same thing with Grover. You're picking Grover for a root, essentially, and then an occasional burst heal. And then his ult, I suppose. So he's more of both of those are more of a secondary healer. Then you have the DPSs. I don't really want to put Grover as a DPS because he's not a DPS. You're not picking him for damage. You're picking him essentially for utility, which we'll get to later. But both Pip and Grok have solid DPS. They can both out DPS multiple carries. They have very good like brawling aspects where they can just go in your face and be like a bruiser that you have to get through. Sort of like an aggressive tank would, but they have self-heal, which is nice. So they kind of fill that role of DPS, and you might even say bruiser. But they can do enough DPS that they would qualify, essentially they would qualify as a carry. If they took away their secondary utility and healing, then they would essentially be a carry. And then you have pocket healers. Or just pocket in general, since Torvald isn't really a healer, but that's kind of where Torvald fits in. Torvald, Pip, and Grok are all pocket healers effectively. Pip can obviously very easily pocket heal someone if he's standing next to a Kinessa or a Shaolin. He can just continuously spam them with heals, making sure that they're always alive, and that's what he does very good when he's being played as a healer. He's not great at healing a full comp, but he is good at specifically like following someone around, right? If I'm playing with Lazy, I would just stand next to him. If he's playing Kinessa and I'm playing Pip, I would just stand next to him, spam, use my utility, use my damage, and then every now and then when I have it, I can heal him up. Same thing with Grok. Grok's kind of different in that he's not really a pocket healer for carries, he's more of a pocket healer for tanks. Usually you'll see Grok in the front line, brawling with the other team, whether it's with their tanks, their healer, or their carries, doesn't really matter, but he'll be in the front line with the tanks, and then when they decide to retreat, they'll get around a corner and they will both heal under a totem, or they'll just put a totem in the fight around a wall so they're healing while they're fighting. That's kind of, so they're both pocket healers, but they're different kinds of pocket healers. Pip's more of the, I need to heal this guy because he's fighting, like I need to heal him, get a quick burst heal, whereas Grok's more like I'm going to continuously push down the enemy team, and we're going to stop every now and then and make sure we're healed to full. And then Torvald, obviously, not a pocket healer, but he's kind of a pocket shielder. He has two good ways. Obviously, D69 have used this a lot, where they use the Buck and the Grok, and they just push up. Even with a barrack, sometimes they'll push up all the way, and they'll just let the Buck jump around over and over again, and the Torvald will just continuously shield him over and over and over again. That's kind of like the comp they've been running the past few weeks. And so that's what Torvald can do. He can either shield anybody that gets hooked, or anybody that just is in trouble in general, or he can specifically target someone for damage. Like either way, he's still pocketing someone essentially. And then last but not least, you have the utility. Utility is Inara, Grok, Grover, and Pip. Utility basically means CC. It doesn't have to be CC, but in this case it's mostly crowd control. Inara is kind of the exception here. She obviously has a lot of abilities that allow her to bring utility without CC per se. The wall obviously is something that only she has. It's the only real utility in the game that isn't either damage of some sort or hard CC. But she also has her cripple, which would be, again, be crowd control of some sort. And then Grok has the right click with the slow. He has just general presence, which in a sense is utility. He has general brawling presence. Same thing with Pip, also has general brawling attributes, and then he also has the utility with the chicken and the slow, and then Grover obviously has the root. So that's kind of your main tank and support split. Obviously, there's also the carries. The carries are a bit more difficult, and I think I'm just going to do those separately because there's so many of them. There's so many champions right now that would classify as a carry of some sort or a damage dealer of some sort. So all the flanks and all the damage dealers, I'll just do them alone. So I'm gonna set that up for either tomorrow or the day after, and we can go through that. But here's your general idea. Like you have, if you want a very general overview, this is how it looks. This is the original. You have your tank, support, damage, and flank in game, and then if you want to split it up more to what it actually looks like, then you have your tanks. Again, you'll see that there's like each character is used multiple times here. Like Torvald is both a tank and a support. Fernando is both a tank, a flank, and a bruiser. So they kind of fill multiple roles. Not everyone does, but most characters have at least 2 roles. So like Ying and Snake, for instance, both only really fill the support role. They can't really do much else. Ying can do damage, but she's definitely not a carry. And then you have someone like Bomb King, who generally speaking is played as a carry, as a damage dealer, but can also be very effective on the flank. So this is more like the general how I would categorize across the whole board, all the characters. But again, next time I'm going to go through the damage dealers, and I'm going to categorize them into how, if they're supports, if they're flank, or if they're flanks, if they're carries, if they're bruisers, and try to sub-categorize those a bit more.